everyone. Go ahead and get started with our committee of the whole meeting today. We have a very full agenda, as I'm sure you're well aware. So we'll get started with a brief COVID update from our city manager, and then we'll get into our action items. And I'll kind of walk you through what the plan is for the action items today. Just as we get started, a couple things as a reminder for those who are joining us this morning. We do have our budget workshop at 1 o'clock. So after COW, I'll actually call for executive session. We do have one executive session to hear a legal opinion. Um, for our budget workshop at 1 o'clock. And then we'll be back together tonight at 7 p.m. for our commission meeting. And tonight we'll have several opportunities for public comment, including we have 2 scheduled public hearings tonight. So I'll walk through that again and just remind folks how they can weigh in as we get closer to the end of this meeting. So with that, welcome everyone to our Committee of the Whole meeting on May 12th. As I said, we'll start today with a brief staff update on our COVID response, and then we'll get right into our action items. All right, City Manager, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor, and good morning, Commissioners. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners, for your time this morning. We'll briefly provide an update. We'll talk a little bit more about some of our response efforts that we're doing related to COVID this afternoon, but I just wanted, in the essence of keeping the same cadence we committed at every commission meeting, every public meeting, just to provide a general update. So I'll go through these slides real quickly. Next slide, please. You'll see the effect of COVID nationwide. We're at about 1.3 million cases total, about 80,000 deaths. And when you, next slide, when you look at the landscape, next slide, please. Here in Michigan, we're at about 47,500 cases, 4,500 deaths statewide. But here in Kent County, our experience has been significantly better than the statewide experience with only 42 deaths. We continue to see the impact of the number of cases at a higher rate disproportionately among people of color, and you'll see the notation there. We have taken the feedback that we've gotten both publicly as well as privately. We've had several groups speak to us about the disproportionate impact of our community. Staff has looked at what we can do internal with recovery, but we've also forwarded those concerns to the county as the health authority to also make them aware of the concerns that have been expressed by various members of the community that have come before you. Next slide. Just to give you an update, we were planning for opening this next week until the stay-at-home order was extended. And part of our opening strategy was try to work in partnership with the state, get as many employees tested as possible. And the public safety staff has gone through testing as well as other essential employees, to include yours truly. We have gotten the results from quite a few of our employees so far. There are several that are still pending, but other results we received from our employees proactively being tested. We've not been notified of any positive tests at this point. So that tells us we are managing our workplace very safely, and the mitigation and prevention plans that we have and staffing plans that we have are working. As you know, building inspections resumed full throttle. All construction services are permitted and being inspected at this time. And we also, last time we gave an update, we couldn't use golf carts on the golf course, but now they're permitted and in full operation. We have fully stood up the Fulton Care Center as our isolation center. We're no longer working in using the guiding light, and the city is not only supportive of it in terms of planning, but we're also cost sharing in the cost to run that center. And so we remain committed to that. And the staff has gone through a preliminary assessment of our needs. I think the county has had several meetings with local government authorities explaining their recent allocation of funding through the CARES Act, and have asked each entity potentially what their local needs are. And our staff has gone through and we've done some preliminary assessment of identifying a large amount of funding potential needs that we would have with COVID from now through the end of December. Next slide. Next slide. We continue to talk about recovery. Again, some of this is in concept and not in full permitted. We're planning for it, but we cannot implement it. And we want to be supportive. We've heard from community, we've heard from commission about being supportive of our hospitality industry, our retail industry and business districts, and the staff is fully committed to make sure we are as flexible as possible in allowing our community to work very creatively with whatever restrictions that we have. We are focusing on maximizing special events and public right of way, whether it's street activation, alley activation, or even parks. And you'll hear some of that this afternoon from our staff. But it's a catch-22. And I know that there's legislation that's on the floor there in Lansing. Okay. So I know there's a legislation that's on the floor in Lansing. Can everybody hear me okay? You're muted.
Better now. It was a little muffled.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Better now.
Yeah. There's a legislation on the floor in Lansing, and that's great if that works, but my focus is to do what we can do within our own local control, and that's what I have the staff focus on planning for now. So we'll talk more about that even on the 19th. When we come back next week, we'll have some specific things that we will want to begin focusing on for commission consideration. Next slide. And again, we remain focused on reopening. The city is not closed, and so that should the word reopening is a little misleading. It's primarily re-entering into the workplace. We're open. We're not open to the public in many instances. And so we need further guidance from the state on that, but we do not need guidance on directing essential employees back to work, and department directors continue to have the flexibility, and who was essential last week, who was not essential, changes week to week based on what we're permitted to do. And so again, we've given all of our employees the appropriate PPE. We have made sure that we are increasing testing, as I said earlier, and make sure that people can work at the appropriate distance safely. We're piloting a program with Kent County Health Department, as well as Michigan State University in Myers, and in terms of a large employer programming. And many of the things that they're talking about, we've already done, with the exception of daily reporting and of the temperature reads and other physical assessments. And so we'll be doing that electronically. I want to thank the police department and fire department and some of the other departments for participating as one of the early adopters of that program. And that concludes my briefing at this time. As I mentioned, we'll have more discussion of some of these issues later this afternoon. So if there are any questions, I can answer those, or have the program staff come on the video conference and do so.
All right.
Manager, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Murphy.
As far as testing is required, are you expecting the commissioners to be tested before we come back?
Has my video been on the entire time or off?
It was on and then it turned off, but there is a little feedback back and forth. So I don't know if it's you moving or what, but it kind of goes in and out.
Work with me, Mayor. Work with
me. All right, I am.
So Commissioner Moody, I right now we're requiring that of essential employees, and not that the commissioners are not essential. Yeah, at some point, if there's availability of testing, we'll talk about that. Matter of fact, probably sooner than later, because one of the extensions that the governor has allowed is the permitted use of electronic meetings through the end of June. And so we'll need to talk about that eventually about when we start to have meetings back on site. And if those are hybrid meetings where the commission is present, but kind of like we did before, where we have limited seating for the public, yes, it would be good protocol to have as many people as possible tested. But right now, we're trying to get first responders and other essential employees on the front line tested.
Thank you.
Thanks. Commissioners, any other questions for our city manager before we move along to the agenda? All right, city manager, thanks for that update. And again, thanks to everyone who's working hard to move us forward and think about what reopening and recovery looks like. Okay, so that will take us to our first presentation today. So we have a presentation of the fiscal year 2021 budget request by the Economic Development Department. And then we have a number of budgets before us for our quarter improvement districts and other authorities and entities. So we'll start off this presentation with Mr. Klooster, who I see just joined us. So I'll turn it over to him and then we'll move forward with the action items.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning. You can all hear me, I presume?
Yes.
Very good. So I want to ease your concerns a little bit that I won't be making individual presentations of each of the next 10 items, but rather I'll give you an overview with this first memo and then allow you to work your way through the various budget resolutions. And of course, would be happy to answer any questions along the way. There is a lot of information in each of the 10 memos that provide details of the work of the boards, but I won't spend time individually on them. Before starting, I need, of course, to thank a lot of people who contributed to making sure that these budgets were ready for your consideration this morning. So that includes, of course, the economic development staff, Reggie Pell, Jessica Solis, Christian Borg, and Emily Madsen, and then Jana Wallace, who provides a significant amount of support to our department throughout the year. And then, of course, the many numerous volunteers, including all of the commissioners who give their time and talent to participate on the boards as well. As you may imagine, it was a bit of a challenging year to get here because the impacts of the pandemic hit just as we were kind of ramping up our conversations with the various boards about their 2021 budgets. And it took creativity and the ability to pivot to get where we are today. So I'm grateful for the support of everybody who participated. So as background, starting out on this memo then, as you know, the Economic Development Department administers 10 boards and authorities, and its operations are largely funded through various revenues associated with the program. The following 10 agenda items and resolutions approve the budgets that have been recommended to you by the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, the Smart Zone Local Development Finance Authority, the Economic Development Corporation, 6 Corridor Improvement Authority boards, and the Uptown Business Improvement District.
Joel, are you going to bring up the document at some point?
Yeah, I'll guide him through this, City Manager. So I'm scrolling down to the next page then, on page 5 of the packet. So the work of the board is
hold on a second.
Hold on. It's
Yeah.
not up.
Do you want the document brought up, City Manager?
Yes, that's what I believe John was asking for.
Yeah.
Bear with me a minute. I wasn't prepped for that.
I'm sorry, Joel.
Joel, are you?
Yeah,
Well,
I'm
it's close.
working on it. The share is not working how it normally works for me. I don't understand.
Okay.
Continue, John, and I'll work on it.
As he's working, I'm bringing that up. I think you all have the agenda packet in front of you, I'll be referencing the packet number pages. On page 5, you'll see the infographic that talks about the outcomes from the projects that were worked on by the Economic Development Department and presented and approved by the City Commission in calendar year 2019. That includes 13 different projects, which with anticipated outcomes of 358 new jobs, with an overall average wage of $19.81 per hour, 91 new housing units, and an estimated $537,000 of annually of new city taxes. The Equitable Economic Development and Mobility Strategic Plan defines in details the strategies that will guide the work of the boards in fiscal year 21, including the 5 strategies that are listed in your memo that were presented as high priority near-term strategies to be implemented first from the plan. Obviously, going forward and through the year, we'll continue to engage all of the boards in conversations from the Economic Recovery and Resiliency Work Group to identify opportunities to align efforts as we learn more about the needs of businesses and business districts as the economy moves through the various phases of reopening. I'm going to move on to page 6 of your agenda packet, which has 2 pie graphs on there. The first chart, so now I'll get into the overview of the budget on a departmental level. So the first chart provides a snapshot of the size of the various authority budgets relative to the overall department. You can see the total appropriation request is $20.7 million. 70% of that is the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority budget, and 23% is the Smart Zone Local Development Finance Authority budget. So the remaining 7% is divided between the 6 corridor improvement authorities, the Business Improvement District, and the Economic Development Corporation. The second graph on that page provides the detail of where the dollars that support these budgets originate. The primary source, very large portion, is tax increment revenues. So that's 58% of the revenues for these budgets come from tax increment revenues. And I think it's important to note that 58% is just the fiscal year 2021 tax increment revenues. The next largest source of funds is from fund balance. That's 33%, and the majority of those revenues are also tax increment revenues from prior years. The remaining 9% comes from grants, application fees, and other funding sources, interest on investments. The grants are primarily grants that the Brownfield Authority obtains from the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. Moving on to the 7th page of your packet. This graph shows the breakdown in appropriations requested in the fiscal year 2021 budgets. It's very important, I think, to note that a significant amount of the budgets support ongoing contractual obligations to support development projects, as well as multi-year contracts. The expenditures are approximately 40% for developer reimbursements through the Brownfield Authority, 25% for grants and loans also to support private development projects, and then 26% of the spending is for programs and initiatives, including most significantly contracts with the Smart Zone Local Development Finance Authority and its partners, but also the work of corridor improvement authorities on implementation of their plans. So that leaves about 10% of the budgets that support ongoing operations as well as debt. So both the Brownfield Authority and the Smart Zone contribute to debt service for various infrastructure projects. And that amount also includes the Corridor Improvement Authority spending on corridor management. And finally, that it also includes the internal service fund cost allocations for services. So then wrapping up here, moving on to the attachments, what you'll see in this first table here is the budgets by authority, and it's relative to the size of their budgets from a revenue and expenditure perspective. The difference here, what we're trying to show is the difference between revenues and appropriations. That difference consists of fund balance from previous years. So most notably, $2.8 million approximately of fund balance from the Brownfield Authority is allocated in fiscal year 21 and $3.3 million of fund balance from the Smart Zone is allocated to fiscal year 21 expenditures, and about a third of that is committed to on contractual obligations already. So the attachments give you the high-level overview of the various budgets, which range, of course, from the largest, the Brownfield Authority, to the Corridor Improvement Authorities, and those range from about $320,000 down to about $30,000. That essentially summarizes the presentation that I wanted to give. Again, I want to thank everybody who did a lot of heavy lifting to get here, not just preparing the budgets, but preparing this presentation and all the work that went into that. And I will be happy to take any questions now or allow you to work through the various resolutions and take questions related to the specific budgets.
Great. Thanks, Jono. I just have two kind of overall questions, and I don't know if you have the answer to these. Usually we talk about them in our economic development project team. So I'm just curious. I saw the on the first slide, kind of the accomplishments. I'm just curious if you have numbers about what's in the pipeline. I know we have a lot of low-income housing units under construction right now. It'd be nice to know how many and when those will start coming online, knowing that we have some significant need in our community. And then my second question is, have we seen a significant impact from COVID on our permits and the projects coming forward? I know I've heard from several developments letting me know that they plan to continue to move forward, but it would be nice to know what the impact is on development citywide.
Yeah, I think I can give you a partial answer there and get back to you with the details, Mayor. That graph or the infographic on the first page is projects that were approved in 2019. And so as you're aware, for example, two projects in there are the projects that Link Up worked on Jefferson and Burton area. And so those are in that report. And one of those is still under construction. The other is online. So some of the information in that graph is looking forward to projects that will start construction. And I can get back to you with the specific details, numbers on your questions.
Great, thanks. Commissioners, any other questions before we move forward and go through each of the budget recommendations? Okay, all right, we'll start with the first one. So can I get a motion for the resolution approving the fiscal year 2021 budget for the City of Grand Rapids South Division Granville Corridor Improvement Authority in the amount of $33,000?
So moved.
So moved.
All right, moved and supported. We've all had a chance to look at this. Mr. Klooster, anything to add specifically to this proposal?
No, I'll be happy to answer questions, but I'll also note that Jessica Solis is on the line too. If there are specific questions for Corridor Improvement Authorities, she is the lead there and has done the bulk of the work to prepare all of those with the boards.
Great, thank you. And I know each board has representation from this body. And if we look at the information before us in the budget request, looks like the bulk of the funding and expenditures will go towards a bid feasibility study that stands for Business Improvement District, and then also corridor management and facade improvement. So commissioners, any questions or comments before I ask the city clerk to call the vote? All right. All right, city clerk.
Commissioner Lanier, yeah. Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Repart,
Yes.
Commissioner Moody,
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes, it passes. All right, next that will take us to a resolution approving the fiscal year 2021 budget for the City of Grand Rapids, Michigan Street Corridor Improvement Authority in the amount of $75,360. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
All right, moved and supported. So again, commissioners, if you look on the appropriations for this, the bulk of the expenditures will go to corridor management, programs and development, and sponsorships. And I know Commissioner Jones serves on this body. Anything to add, Commissioner Jones?
No, ma'am. Nothing.
All right, any questions or comments? All right, I'll ask the city clerk to call the question.
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Repart,
Yes.
Commissioner Moody,
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes. All right, next that will take us to a resolution approving the fiscal year 2021 budget for the City of Grand Rapids West Side Corridor Improvement Authority in the amount of $200,000. Can I get a motion? Moved by Commissioner
Support.
O'Connor, do I have support? And supported by Commissioner Moody. Again, Commissioners, the breakdown of this for appropriations is for facade and septet improvements and then programs and development. Any questions or comments on this request? All right, City Clerk, you want to call the question?
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Repart,
Yes.
Commissioner Moody,
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes. That carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution approving the fiscal year 2021 budget for the City of Grand Rapids Uptown Business Improvement District in the amount of $116,234. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
All right. Moved and supported. So this is our business improvement district that Uptown has had for a number of years. And similar to years past, they will be using the funds for business development, district management, and then streetscape maintenance. Any questions or comments, Commissioners? All right, City Clerk, go ahead and call the question for that, please.
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Repart,
Yes.
Commissioner Moody,
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes. All right, that carries. Next, that will take us to a resolution approving the fiscal year 2021 budget for the City of Grand Rapids Uptown Corridor Improvement Authority in the amount of $229,000. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support.
All right, moved and supported. And Commissioners, again, similar to years past with Uptown SID, they'll be using their funds on corridor management, facade improvements, marketing and branding, programs development, and streetscape capital improvements. Any questions or comments? All right, City Clerk, you want to call the question on this?
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Repart,
Yes.
Commissioner Moody,
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi, Mayor Bliss.
Yes.
Yes. All right, that carries. All right, next this will take us to a resolution approving the fiscal year 2021 budget for the City of Grand Rapids Southtown Corridor Improvement Authority in the amount of $319,000. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support.
All right, moved and supported by our third ward commissioners. And commissioners, if you look at this budget, the expenditures will go to corridor management, facade improvement, general fund, third ward parity, and programs and development. Any questions or comments? All right, City Clerk, you want to call the question?
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Repart,
Yes.
Commissioner Moody,
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes, it carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution approving the fiscal year 2021 budget for the City of Grand Rapids North Quarter Corridor Improvement Authority in the amount of $30,000.
So moved.
Support.
All right, moved and supported. And North Quarter, it's nice to see them have some funds in the bank, and they plan to use it in program and development and streetscape maintenance. Any questions or comments? All right, City Clerk, you want to call the question?
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Repart,
Yes.
Commissioner Moody,
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes, it carries. All right, next that will take us to our Smart Zone, and this is a resolution approving the fiscal year 2021 budget for the City of Grand Rapids Smart Zone Local Development Finance Authority in the amount of $4,773,915. Got that wrong. $4,773,915.
So moved.
All right, I got to move to have support.
Support.
All right, moved and supported. So, commissioners, this is a little bit more detailed and complex budget. I know we have a commissioner who serves on Smart Zone, but any questions about this? It's very similar to years past budgets that we've supported for the Smart Zone. All right, seeing none, I'll turn to our city clerk.
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Repart,
Yes.
Commissioner Moody,
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes. All right, next that will take us to a resolution approving the fiscal year 2021 budget for the city of Grand Rapids Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. Can I get a motion?
So move.
Support.
All right, moved and supported. And as Mr. Klusser walked us through this, again, this is similar to years past for the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. Any questions or comments? All right, I'll ask the city clerk to call the question.
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones, Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Repart,
Yes.
Commissioner Moody,
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes. All right, that will take us to our one of our last budgets related to economic development. So this is a resolution approving the fiscal year 2021 budget for the City of Grand Rapids Economic Development Corporation. Can I get a motion?
So moved. Support.
All right, moved and supported. Commissioners, any questions about this budget? All right. City Clerk, you want to call the question on this?
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Repart,
Yes.
Commissioner Moody,
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes, it carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution approving an application to the Economic Development Corporation for the City of Grand Rapids for financing assistance for Michigan Christian Home, or what we refer to as Beacon Hill. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
So move.
All right, moved and supported. So commissioners, we had a public hearing related to this request. I see Mr. Klusser has joined us again. Mr. Klusser, anything to add about this request?
Just that this is the last item that will come to you related to the 26-unit independent senior living expansion at the Beacon Hill at Eastgate project. And a reminder that the actual request is to facilitate bond financing through the Economic Development Corporation in an amount not to exceed $22.5 million for the construction of that project. So yeah, public hearing was at your last meeting, and this will need to go back to the Economic Development Corporation one last time for final approval before issuance of the bonds.
Great, thank you. So we had our public comment period and did not hear any negative feedback on this. So that was good, and had some positive feedback about Beacon Hill and their work that they're doing in the community and in partnership with the community. So any final questions or comments, commissioners? All right, I'll ask the city clerk to call the question.
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Repart,
Yes.
Commissioner Moody,
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes, it carries. All right, commissioners, next that will take us to a resolution approving funding awards for CDBG home and JAG programs and the submission of our fiscal year 2021 annual action plan. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Support.
All right, moved and supported. We have Ms. Bohach with us. I also want to acknowledge and appreciate the three commissioners who worked on a subcommittee to make these recommendations. Appreciate your work. But we'll kick this off with Ms. Bohach to give us an overview of this, and then we'll open it up for questions or comments.
Thank you. Good morning. Actually, the next two items are specific to our annual allocation process for federal housing and community development funds. And you'll have to vote on them separately, but I'll just wrap them up in one overview, just like Jono did for the economic development, make it easier for you. But these funds are for federal housing and community development activities included under the Community Development Block Grant, the Home Investment Partnerships, Justice Assistance Grant, and the Emergency Solutions Grants programs. These do not include the CARES Act funding Those funds will be allocated separately within the economic recovery strategy that you've been discussing, and I think you'll discuss later today as well. These resolutions include specific organizations, award levels identified for each of those organizations, and their specific projects that would be carried out between July 1 and June 30th of 2021. The resolution also authorizes the submission of our annual action plan to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and that plan serves as our annual application for those funds to receive them. The recommendations were presented to the City Commission on March 17th, and there was a draft. The draft annual action plan was available for a 30-day comment period. That also included a public hearing on April 14th. You received 5 comments that were provided to you that were provided in writing and forwarded to you, and you also received 1 comment during that public hearing date. The final award amounts in the resolutions remain the same, with the exception of removing $200,000 of reprogrammed funds from the Neighborhood Infrastructure Program. We're recommending that based on current need, that we not reserve that for those activities and actually include it into the allocation for the economic recovery strategy to provide more resources that go to address issues related to the COVID response. So that's in a nutshell what those 2 resolutions entail.
All right, thank you, Ms. Bohach. So why don't we start with the first one, only because the resolution before us that we'll vote on is related to CDBG Home and JAG, and then I'll take the second resolution related to ESG separately, because I know we'll need to provide an opportunity for 1 abstention. So commissioners, questions about the CDBG Home and JAG recommendations? I know the 3 of you who worked on the subcommittee, do you want to share your thoughts first? So Commissioner Asasi, Commissioner Lanier, Commissioner Repart.
Mayor, I have really nothing to add. I think Connie did a really good job at summarizing the work and the recommendations, and I think the memo went into more depth as to the awards that we're recommending from the committee. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, any other questions or comments?
Mayor, I would like to just state for the record that the city has not reduced any of its funding for essential housing needs or services that we would expect to be supplanted by any private sector or donate or philanthropic funding. That we're fully committed to our annual allocation of federal dollars towards housing efforts.
Thank you. Along with our continued commitment to our neighborhood associations, I think you'll see that clearly in these recommendations. All right, commissioners, any other questions or comments before I turn to our city clerk? All right, city clerk.
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Repart,
Yes.
Commissioner Moody,
Yes.
Commissioner Usasi,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes. All right, that carries. Next, that will take us to a resolution approving the fiscal year 2021 emergency solution grants program funding awards. Can I get a motion?
So moved. Support.
All right.
Mayor,
Moved and supported.
this is Commissioner Jones. I need to abstain from this next item as it pertains to my employer.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner.
Mhm.
So commissioners, again, these are the emergency solutions grants, and the recommendation is for the funding to support some of our great partners in our community working around providing emergency services. And so it's a funding recommendation for the Community Rebuilders, Grand Rapids Urban League, and the Salvation Army. And this is related to rapid rehousing, homeless prevention, and eviction prevention. Any questions or comments?
Mayor, if there are no comments by the commission, I would again like to privilege to state for the record that the city's funding for homelessness services as well as rapid rehousing has not decreased, nor have we expected any federal funding to be supplanted by any private investment.
Thank you, City Manager. All right, any other final questions or comments? All right, we'll turn to our city clerk.
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Repart,
Yes.
Commissioner Moody,
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes. City clerk, can you ask for an abstention? Any abstentions?
Are there any abstentions?
I abstain.
All right, that carries. All right, commissioners, next that will take us to our resolution setting a public hearing on established property taxes and proposed fiscal year 2021 budget. And this is to set our public hearing for our next meeting, I believe. Let me pull it up.
Yes, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Do I have a motion and support?
So moved.
Support?
I'm looking at the memo again, Mayor. It says May 21. So that's a Thursday.
Yeah, I was looking at the date as well. City manager, you want to weigh in? I thought this was scheduled for at the on the second page it says to be scheduled remotely for Tuesday, May 19th at 7 p.m. So in the actual resolution on page 2, it says next Tuesday night at 7 p.m.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Claren, are you on the line?
And then it shows that the final resolution authorizing the millage rates will be at our final budget meeting on the 21st. I just want to make sure I'm reading that correctly. Is that right, city manager?
I need to ask for some clarification. We had discussed this previously about having the tax rate, the revenues approved prior to the budget adoption. And so if Ms. Claren can reconcile the dates on that item for us.
Well, what's before us is the public hearing, to set the public hearing. And my understanding is the public hearing is going to be set for Tuesday evening at 7, and then the resolution finalizing the millage rates will be part of the budget resolution that comes before us on the 21st.
That's correct. That's correct.
Oh, Molly, you're on mute. Can't hear ya.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a couple of things going on. Tonight we have I think we're confusing the revenues with the property tax, the millage. So tonight is a public hearing on revenues that are associated with the fees and fines, those things. What this item is to set the public hearing for the actual budget as well as the property, setting the property tax. So this item is just for the 19th, doing that public hearing. We'll adopt those two items or those as one item on the 21st.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what the mayor just said.
Yep. I'm just confirming.
Great. Thank you. All right, commissioners, any questions or comments? All right, we'll have the city clerk call the question. Public hearing next Tuesday at 7 p.m.
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Repart,
Yes.
Commissioner Moody,
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes, it carries. All right, thank you, everyone. So that gets us through our action items. I am going to call the question in a moment to go in executive session. So we do have an executive session today at 11 a.m. We were sent instructions for that from our city attorney along with a memo. So hopefully you've had a chance to review that. But before I call that, I just want to remind folks, we do have our 1 p.m. budget session. So we'll come back together as a full body for our budget session at 1 o'clock today. And then tonight we have our 7 p.m. City Commission meeting, and there are 4 opportunities for public comment tonight. So the first opportunity will be on items we're voting on. We have a scheduled public hearing related to service provision fees that would go into effect July 1. And then we have a scheduled public hearing on a downtown improvement district special assessment role, and then public comment at the end. So similar to our last meeting, we'll give a phone number at the beginning and we'll ask people to call in, and then they'll be put in a queue based on what public comment period they want to speak to. So if you intend to call in tonight, you can call into our 311 system and we can put you in the queue for one of those 4 public comment periods. So with that, commissioners, can I get a motion to go into executive session?
Moved.
Or
Moved and supported, and I'll ask our city clerk to call the question to go in executive session, and then we'll close out of this, and then I'll hear back from all of you as we call into our 11 a.m. executive session. City clerk?
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
yes.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Repart,
Yes.
Commissioner Moody,
Yes.
Commissioner Sassi,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes.
Just one comment, the 1 o'clock WebEx is a separate session. So if you not come back to this meeting session, you'll log into another one. So that's all been posted online, everything. So there's 3 different WebEx sessions for today.
Great. Thank you, city clerk, for that clarification. All right, commissioners, I'll see you again at 1, and then we'll be together momentarily in our executive session. And with that, we'll call this committee of the whole and we'll recess out of this. All right. See you all soon.